Hey Singapore, you're watching episode 12 of SG Sports Uncut. I'm your host, Raj Kumar, and Uncut is the show that brings you closer to our Team Singapore athletes and officials. On today's show, we thrust the spotlight on the sport of squash. Is the sport still relevant and popular among Singaporeans today? And what are the future plans of squash in Singapore? Well, for that and much more, join us in our discussion with the Singapore Squash Rackets Association. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 12 of SG Sports Uncut. President of the Singapore Squash Rackets Association, Patrick Thio. Let's begin this discussion with you. And as we're now already into 2020, what is your assessment of the overall current squash scene in Singapore?
I think overall it has been very vibrant. We have many activities that we have been conducting over the year, and even more activities planned. We have junior tournaments, we have our senior circuits, we have the National Squash League going on. So many events going throughout the year. So it's very vibrant. We also have plans to bring in overseas exhibition match, and some of the world's best players, we plan to bring them in end of June, and do look out for that.
So we'll touch on that a little later on.
Yes.
What is your take on the national teams which competed at the SEA Games about 2 months ago? We sent the men's and the women's teams respectively. I was there covering as well together with our SG Sports TV crew. And your overall thoughts on both the men and the women?
I think it's unfortunate. I think most people know that there was some change in the format of the game because the courts were not ready, unfortunately.
For the doubles.
For the doubles.
The squash doubles.
And it's for jumbo doubles as well as the international doubles.
Correct.
So that was an area that we were actually focusing on. So unfortunately that did not come through. Where we did play in the singles, we did meet our expectations for the men's as well as the women's team.
Okay.
But it wasn't our strength in that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's turn to Vice President of the SSRA, Josephine Choo. A follow-up question on the SEA Games. The squad fell short of delivering a gold medal this time around in Manila. And even though the squash doubles was cancelled, as Patrick said, I believe 1 month before the games, what was SSRA's planned target for the athletes to achieve?
Actually, we were targeting for 2 golds. Understandably, from the jumbo doubles, 2 silvers as well as 3 bronzes. So in the end, we actually still managed to sort of meet our targets without the 2 golds.
Okay.
Yeah, so we still got 2 silvers and 3 bronzes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand that just before the end of 2019, the NSA sent a squad of players to compete in the World Men's Team Championships for the very first time. How did Samuel and the other athletes, Samuel Kang and the other athletes, fare in the United States?
Right. I would say this was more a event for exposure and participation. In fact, it was just a subsidized kind of arrangement we had with players that were interested. So this was not really our first team that went, because it was almost immediately after the SEA Games.
Correct.
But I think they really had a very good experience because they were able to play with, can you imagine, like the world top, these are professionals, the top few in the world and all that. So it was really very good exposure.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were actually not really expecting very much from that team.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Samuel was injured just before the SEA Games final. Did he get to play?
He actually went and he did play.
Okay. Let's hear now from the chairwoman of the coaching division in Joannah Yue. Joannah, my first question to you relates to the appointment of our former men's gold medalist in Vivian Ramanan as the coach of the SEA Games squad. This took place around 8 weeks before the SEA Games. Could you tell us how this appointment came about, especially since in 2017 he was still competing and winning gold medals for the Republic?
I think his appointment came about because we all know that Alan resigned at that point. It was not an ideal situation. And Vivian was a natural selection because of his experience in SEA Games, and he was actually already working as a coach under SSRA. So his knowledge of the players and his experience at that level, I think he was a natural selection for us to appoint him to lead the team.
Okay.
And at that time, we wanted minimum disruption for our players and consistency for our SEA Games players. So Team Arnold was also still coaching our team till end of November.
Right.
Yeah.
like you said, it's no secret that
Yeah.
former technical director Alan Soiser and the national coach Timothy Arnold left the NSA after the new exco was elected last September. Did their departures 8 weeks before the games affect the players' preparations, which according to local media reports, they did air their concerns during the AGM, Joannah?
Yeah, so I wouldn't think that it was major disruption because the committee actually tried to minimize the disruption we had. In fact, Tim Arnold working till end of November. He was still working with the SEA Games squad. They were still booking sessions with him, and Ryan is still under specs scholarship, so she continued to train with Tim. And we brought in Alvin Kyo and Naviswan. Naviswan is world top 30, and they came down to spar with our players. So in fact, we beef up our preparation for the SEA Games during that time.
From an outsider's point of view, I mean, the fact that I covered quite a bit
Yes.
of the squash team,
Yes.
I can tell you the players didn't seem like they were affected in any way because Vivian had it under control.
That's
And I mean, the tournament is the tournament. The
Yes.
caliber of the opponents just, in certain matches just didn't go our way. But I think our athletes laid it all on the court, and they did the Republic the best that they could given the short preparation time. Coming back to Patrick, now that it's been 5 months since the departure of Alan and Timothy, are you in a position today to briefly explain their reasons for leaving the NSA, especially when there was some rumors of not being able to see eye to eye on a few issues?
I think there were differences, as you mentioned, unable to see eye to eye. I think Alan's methods were a bit different from what our expectations are. There was a lack of transparency. There wasn't a proper selection criteria, and these contributed to some of the decisions we took. Of course, maybe you have heard also this improper conduct that he encountered, and we didn't think it was right, and there shouldn't be any cover-up. So we already went through the investigations, and we decided on actions to be taken, and Alan decided it was best that he resigned.
Okay. I understand that Timothy Arnold, just as Joannah mentioned, is still involved in the local scene as he's training our national players like Sneha Sivakumar and Aoyong Wayan as part of the SPECS program, which is under the Singapore Sports Institute.
We are still engaging with him to work with YN, but not Sneha. Sneha is no longer in the SPECS program. She had to stop because of her A-level exams, so she withdrew from that program.
Okay.
But the YN has continually been training under the SPECS program with Timothy Arnold. So there was continuity in that aspect of it.
Yeah, and she did well at the SEA Games, especially with the silver medal, if I'm not...
for the team event.
For the team event.
Ladies team event.
Yes.
Josephine, in light of the current coronavirus, what has SSRA done in terms of the public and national players at the facilities island-wide?
I think as with what's happening in the Ident, we have actually stepped up cleaning of the facilities, and players now have to take temperatures, declare their travel. But what we have also done is that we have actually separated our groups of trainees into 2 groups. So they actually are coming in staggered, much like what the businesses are doing, so that it's actually to reduce interaction between the different groups. And they have specific times to come and leave, and specific pods to gather and report. And parents are also advised not to hang around there, so parents have to drop and leave as well. So this is some of what we've done.
Okay. And do you have club tournaments or the domestic league scheduled for these few months? Are they impacted as well?
Actually, what we've done is the National Squash League, which involves up to about 90 teams. It was actually supposed to start in March. So we have actually tentatively told the community that we're pushing it back for a month to April, and then we'll see how it goes with this evolving situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joannah Yue, let's turn the attention to the squash coaches in Singapore. How many applicants do you receive on an average annually for individuals who wish to become squash coaches?
Based on record, normally SSRA will conduct about 2 sessions of level 1 coaching, and depending on demand, level 2 we may have 1 in 2 years. So per course, we take in about 14 to 18 participants.
Okay.
So usually it's booked, fully booked.
Okay.
And so that's what we do. And we also conduct workshops, so modular workshops. So basically, coaches can upgrade their skills. For example, if that workshop is about footwork, so they can come in just for 45 minutes just working on that.
Okay. So as the chairwoman of coaching,
Yeah.
you just mentioned that you do conduct coaching courses.
Yes.
So what does the course program entail, and probably the cost involved?
Okay, so
And level 1,
yeah,
when you attain a level 1 cert,
what happens?
to what level can you coach?
Okay, so for level 1 coaching is usually what we call beginner's coach. So it's the first coach for players, and the course entails skills and knowledge of that level, and then the coaches will go through the sessions, the theory sessions, and then the practical sessions, and how they deliver the sessions, and then there will be an exam conducted at the end, and after which they have passed the exams, both theory and practical. They have to go through a 20-hour what we call
Got to
lock in
that 20 hours.
lock in 20 hours to
before you
learn,
can
like it's like a practical
formally become
under a coach, a certified coach. So normally a level 1 coaching course will cost about $300, and the level 2 will be $450.
Okay.
And to move on to for a level 1 coach, you can actually start coaching in a school already.
Oh, okay.
Because so coaching in a school is more complicated, because you got to get your first aid, you got to get other certification. You combine it with the squash coaching certificate, and that's when you can coach in the school. But if you get your level 2 coaching cert, and that's when you can actually move up to be a state coach. Yeah,
Okay.
coaching a nation. Yeah.
All they have to do is to approach SSRA.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And but of course, sometimes we have to look at the level of squash playing skill
The
of that coach,
competency.
the competency. You can't be a beginner and apply to be a
right.
coach.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Let's turn now the attention to the schools movement and youth development. And is squash played in all primary schools, or in primary schools in general?
Right now for primary schools, the schools do not compete. The primary schools do not compete like inter-school kind of format.
Okay.
But a lot of little kids, they actually play individually. That means for themselves. So they learn squash and they play in our local tournaments, but they do not compete for the school.
Oh, okay.
So generally, these kids start their squash in academies or under private coaches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to secondary schools,
Yeah.
does squash feature in all secondary schools in the country? If not, why not?
No, squash is not featured in all secondary schools in Singapore. First of all, not all schools have got squash courts.
Okay.
And even if they do not, sometimes they do not get access to public courts. It's very tough because most of the schools will want their CCA to be played straight after school. So basically with the limited number of squash courts, it is not possible for all schools to play squash. So we do have a number of schools playing, but not all schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Josephine, with the school terms already underway in 2020, how is, for the benefit of our viewers, how is the sport of squash taught in schools in Singapore? Is it taught by, are all the PE teachers squash trained, or you have to bring in?
Okay, I would say that most schools with squash, what they've done is they've actually set aside a budget to hire a squash coach specific for the sport. So it's quite a niche sport. So I can't imagine that the PE teacher, maybe they can get the kids into the squash court, give them some squash rackets, but
Basics.
to that level of competency where you want to play at a competitive level, most of these schools, or in fact all of these schools, actually have proper squash coaches coming in.
Okay. Do you roughly know how many schools have students playing squash?
Right, I would say that probably for the secondary school level, we have up to about seven girls' school and maybe about nine boys' school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you reckon our schools are still missing or lacking in terms of churning out talented and good squash players?
Right. I think this churning out of players depends on the facilities. I feel that obviously the schools with the squash courts are able to obviously have that supply, because it's part of their CCA. So what we are doing is that we are trying to reach out to schools without the facilities. Maybe we can tie them up with a public courts or a club that is nearby their school, and get them to sort of go there after school to play. So that's what we're actually trying to do right now. And in fact, a lot of the players, like what Joannah mentioned earlier, they're actually starting really young these days. They're starting like 6 years old, 7 years old. So by the time they reach that level, that when they go to school, they're actually quite competent players already. Yeah, and the coaches will straight away identify these players and, okay, you can play for the school. Yeah, so that's how the system is working right now.
I tried my hand at squash, I think in my college days, because my college back in Yishun Junior College, they had 2 squash courts, and I was playing
decent squash?
Decent.
I'm sure.
But no, I was playing average. Average because I was better at badminton than this, because at squash, I think there was a fear, there was a phobia that I was going to kind of whack by the racket by the opponent, and that's why I held back, and so I did try for a couple of months the sport. Tennis I never tried, so don't intend to. It's too endurance. But yeah, so I did try, and I know how hard it is to play squash. But Joannah, let's come back to you.
Yeah.
Do the men's or women's teams, do they even get the chance to go down to the schools during the year and work with the raw and amateur teenage players?
So far, no, they haven't done that. But what we have actually done when we came on board is we actually have a Friday match play day, where some of these talented kids who are not in national junior training but they've got lots of potential, we actually invite them down, not every Friday but whenever they can, to come down and play with our national junior players. And that's where they interact and that's where they learn. Because to be honest, the logistic of and the time schedule of our players going down to the school and getting permission to interact with the students, it's not sustainable. So we thought that by inviting these players to our courts, and they get to play squash, I mean they already know how to play squash, but we are keeping them in our loop because we want to keep them interested, to get them hungry that they can one day be in the national junior squad. So that's what we started on every Friday match play day.
And what do you hope to achieve by these visits? I mean, so the students come to your locations.
Yes.
Okay. What do you hope to achieve with these visits, and do you get to talent spot players who might not have initially demonstrated any potential?
I think it is the talent identification is a long process, and sometimes some kids actually blossom much later. So it's an ongoing process, I would say. And when we invite them down, we want them to know that we are looking at you, so we are interested in you. But sometimes the timing is not right yet, for them to come in, because we just have limited courts, with limited resources. We can't be doing getting everybody at the squash court. So we keep them in the loop. We also make it that the purpose of the visit is we want them to know what's going on and get them really interested.
Okay. Patrick, in a follow-up question, based on your knowledge, would you say that we already have in place a foolproof talent identification system in our schools to ensure that all squash players with potential are fast-tracked to the national team setup? Oh, you want to answer? Okay, you take it. Really great.
Yeah, actually, I don't think there's a foolproof system.
Okay.
For me, talent identification system, I think is already in place. In terms of, we have our academies where they are actually training the young kids. We are monitoring that. The local junior tournaments, we are also eyeballing some of these kids.
Okay.
So the system is in place. But to fast track them to be national players, I think it's a long process, and there are challenges to that. Because there are a few variables that we're looking at when we can identify this player, but is the player being well supported by the parents? Are they of the physical size, puberty? Have they reached puberty to be able to play to their, their maximum potential? And how can we sustain their interest in the game. So I think talent identification system is there, but these are the variables and challenges that we have to constantly look into.